people believe history is written in the Galactic Council. They are wrong. History is written long before the debates begin, then carried into the chamber by those forced to live with its consequences. I stood beside my wife, Queen Olivia Voss of the Solarian Empire, as we entered Aurora Nexus, the greatest diplomatic station in the known galaxy. Crystal towers stretched toward an artificial sun while delegates from hundreds of civilizations filled the immense council hall. Ancient empires, powerful military alliances, and wealthy merchant unions spoke with the confidence of races that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Humanity was different. We were one of the council's youngest members, tolerated more than respected. Our small delegation drew little attention, and those who noticed us offered polite smiles that barely concealed their contempt. Then the chamber darkened. A holographic map appeared above the council floor. One border system after another turned crimson as reports confirmed the relentless advance of the Iron Legion. Entire colonies had vanished overnight. The next projected target glowed over Solarian territory. For the first time that morning, silence settled over the council. The galaxy had finally realized the war was coming. The council speaker raised his staff, and the towering chamber fell into complete silence. The crimson hologram expanded until it filled the dome above us, revealing the frontier in terrifying detail. Entire sectors blinked red, each one representing a civilization that had stopped answering distress calls. There were no reports of negotiations, no survivors describing heroic last stands. The Iron Legion left only silence. Our reconnaissance confirms the worst, the speaker announced. The Legion has conquered 17 border systems in less than 3 months. Murmurs spread through the assembly. They do not occupy worlds, one military analyst continued. They dismantle them. Every captured shipyard begins constructing Legion warships within days. Every conquered colony strengthens the enemy. The display shifted again. A stream of crimson arrows pierced deep into civilized space, bypassing heavily fortified frontiers and striking vulnerable worlds far behind the defensive lines. The strategy made no sense according to traditional military doctrine, yet it had worked every single time. General after general rose to speak. We must assemble the Grand Fleet. We need every available battleship. A decisive engagement at the frontier is our only option. The chamber quickly descended into familiar political arguments. Ancient rivals blamed one another for ignoring earlier warnings. Merchant unions demanded protection for trade routes before committing resources. Smaller civilizations pleaded for military assistance while larger empires negotiated command authority before agreeing to cooperate. I remained silent. From my seat beside Olivia, I studied the tactical projections instead of the speeches. Something about the Legion, its advance felt deliberate. They weren't choosing targets based solely on military value. Their attacks followed patterns hidden beneath the obvious. Olivia leaned slightly toward me. "What are you thinking?" she whispered. "I think we're looking at the wrong map." She frowned but said nothing. Above us, another Solarian colony turned crimson. The military projection recalculated automatically. Estimated time until the Iron Legion reached the Solarian Empire. 34 standard days. The countdown appeared in enormous white letters across the chamber. For the first time in centuries, even the oldest empires had no answer. The debate continued for nearly 2 hours, yet nothing truly changed. Admirals demanded larger fleets. Politicians demanded stronger resolutions. Economists warned that mobilizing every navy would cripple interstellar trade before the Iron Legion ever reached the core worlds. Every proposal assumed the enemy would attack exactly where everyone expected. Humanity remained silent. Our delegation occupied one of the smallest diplomatic platforms in the chamber, tucked between representatives of 2 minor trading coalitions. Most delegates never glanced in our direction. To them, the Terran Federation was still a young civilization with little influence beyond its own borders. We possessed no ancient empire, no legendary fleets, and no glorious record of galactic conquest. That reputation suited us perfectly. Olivia sat beside me with the composure expected of the Solarian Queen, though I could sense the growing tension beneath her calm expression. Every new intelligence update brought the crimson markers closer to her worlds. Every projection reduced the time available to prepare. One of the elder counselors finally acknowledged our presence. "The Terran Federation has remained unusually quiet," he observed. "Does humanity intend to contribute ships to the coalition?" Several delegates turned toward us for the first time. Their expressions carried little expectation. The assumption was obvious. Humanity would pledge a token fleet, offer logistical assistance, and quietly stand behind the older powers while they fought the real war. The chief Terran ambassador rose first. delivering the formal response. The Federation will honor its treaty obligations and provide whatever assistance is required. Polite nods followed. The discussion would have ended there if the ambassador had not looked toward me. As for our civilian strategic advisor, she continued, he has requested permission to address the council. A ripple of confusion spread across the chamber. A civilian. Several generals exchanged amused glances. Others returned to their conversations, clearly expecting nothing of value. I stood slowly, adjusted the cuffs of my plain gray jacket, and walked toward the central platform. Hundreds of eyes followed me. To them I was not a soldier, not a commander, and certainly not someone whose words could influence the fate of the galaxy. I was simply Ethan Brooks, a human, a civilian, and, as far as the official record was concerned, nothing more. I stopped at the center of the chamber and waited. Silence spread slowly as conversations faded one by one. The council expected a ceremonial statement, perhaps a polite promise of support from a young civilization eager to earn respect. Instead, I looked up at the tactical map without acknowledging the hundreds of eyes fixed upon me. The Iron Legion is not winning because it's stronger, I said calmly. It is winning because you are giving it exactly the battlefield it wants. Several admirals frowned. One of them folded all four arms across his chest. And what battlefield would that be? Human, he asked. The frontier. A few quiet laughs echoed through the chamber. I ignored them. You've concentrated your fleets along predictable defensive lines. Every wargame you've shown today assumes the Legion will attack from outside your borders. I pointed toward the glowing projections crossing Solarian space. But these vectors tell a different story. The display enlarged where I indicated. They bypassing your strongest fortifications. They aren't breaking through your defenses. They reappearing behind them. A murmur spread across the delegates. They were already inside your territory. That sentence silenced the room. I continued before anyone could interrupt. If I were commanding the Legion, I wouldn't de-waste ships assaulting heavily defended systems. I'd de-infiltrate reconnaissance teams years in advance, establish hidden supply caches, sabotage communications, then launch simultaneous attacks from within. Your frontier fleets would become irrelevant before firing a single shot. Several officers hurriedly examined their own tactical displays. Others exchanged uncertain glances. I turned toward the council speaker. Don, to reinforce the border. Confusion crossed his face. Protect your evacuation corridors. Fortify transportation hubs. Secure strategic mountain passes on inhabited worlds. Prepare civilian shelters and emergency logistics. Save lives first. Territory can be reclaimed. People cannot. The chamber remained still. Then a low chuckle broke the silence. Another followed. Within moments, laughter rolled through the assembly once again. To them, I wasn't a strategist. I was merely a civilian offering military advice to commanders whose ancestors had fought wars before humanity had invented writing. None of them realized they had just laughed at the only warning that might save them. The laughter spread across the chamber with surprising speed. Veteran admirals exchanged amused glances. Diplomats whispered behind elegant hands, and several younger officers openly shook their heads. To them, my warning sounded less like military analysis and more like nervous imagination from a species that had never commanded a galactic war. A towering Virexian general rose from his seat, his bronze armor ringing softly as he folded four powerful arms across his chest. His voice carried effortlessly through the hall. So the Terran solution is to abandon the frontier and hide behind mountains? More laughter followed. I answered without raising my voice. My solution is to protect civilians instead of your pride. The general smiled coldly. You presume to lecture commanders whose ancestors were winning wars while your species was still fighting with sharpened stone. I presume nothing, I replied. I'm simply reading the evidence. Another delegate stood. The Iron Legion possesses the largest invasion fleet in recorded history. They conquer systems through overwhelming force, not hidden infiltration. They use both, I said. You only notice the force. The chamber grew quieter, though not more convinced. Beside me, I caught Olivia watching the tactical display rather than me. Her expression remained composed, but I recognized the doubt hidden beneath it. She trusted my judgment in countless matters, yet this was different. She had been raised among admirals who believed strength was measured by fleets, not preparation. When our eyes met, she offered the faintest shake of her head. Not in anger, in concern. She thought I was letting fear cloud my reasoning. The council speaker finally raised his staff. The recommendations of the Terran advisor have been entered into the official record. His tone made it clear the discussion was finished. The council will proceed with the approved mobilization plan. Around the chamber, commanders immediately resumed debating fleet formations, supply routes, and offensive operations along the frontier. My proposal vanished beneath hundreds of voices almost as soon as it had been spoken. I returned to my seat without another word. Sometimes the most dangerous decision in war is not choosing the wrong strategy. It is refusing to imagine that the enemy might already be one step ahead. The meeting finally adjourned, though no decisions had truly been made beyond committing more fleets to the frontier. Delegates departed in tightly formed groups, already discussing deployment schedules, supply quotas, and political concessions. They left convinced they had taken control of the crisis. I knew better. Olivia and I walked through the polished corridors of Aurora Nexus without speaking. The enormous windows overlooked thousands of ships arriving from every corner of the galaxy, each one answering the Council's call to arms. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded me how many targets were gathering in one place. "You embarrassed half the Council," Olivia said at last. "I wasn't trying to." "I know." She sighed quietly. "That is what worries me." I stopped beside the observation glass. We're preparing for the wrong war." She folded her arms. "Every intelligence report says the Legion is massing fleets beyond the frontier. Because they want us to see those fleets." Olivia studied me for a long moment. "You sound certain?" "I'm afraid I am." Before she could answer, my communicator vibrated once. No alert tone, no priority marker, just a single encrypted transmission. I opened it without changing expression. "Resolute Dawn, Terran High Command Reconnaissance Package 7 complete. Prediction confirmed." I read the message twice. Attached to it were orbital scans, intercepted transmissions, and thermal signatures collected by unmanned Terran reconnaissance drones that had spent months silently mapping Solarian territory. The evidence was undeniable. Hidden facilities beneath abandoned mining complexes. Power emissions inside supposedly empty colonies. Encrypted communication bursts originating hundreds of light years behind the frontier. Sleeper cells, exactly where I had feared they would be. The Legion had never intended to fight its way into the Empire. It had already entered. I locked the report before anyone nearby could glimpse the display. Olivia noticed the change in my expression. "What is it?" I looked through the station, this enormous window at the countless Allied warships preparing for a battle that would never happen. The Council just ignored its last chance to prevent this. "What did the message say?" I met her eyes. "It says we were already too late." 3 hours after leaving Aurora Nexus, I stepped aboard the Resolute Dawn, the Terran Federation's flagship command carrier. Unlike the ceremonial vessels favored by the older civilizations, nothing aboard her had been built to impress diplomats. The corridors were plain, the lighting practical, and every compartment existed for a single purpose: war. The command center was already waiting. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood beside the central tactical display with 24 officers gathered around her. Nobody saluted. Nobody wasted time with formal greetings. "You were right," she said simply. The hologram came alive. Red markers appeared across Solarian territory, not along the frontier but deep inside the Empire itself. Hidden power signatures, buried communication arrays, underground manufacturing sites. Every point represented an Iron Legion infiltration cell that had escaped every Council intelligence service. "Confirmation?" I asked. 100%. Major Elias Chen enlarged the map. Our reconnaissance drones located covert supply depots beneath abandoned mines, civilian warehouses, and inactive orbital platforms. They've been building this network for years. Another officer highlighted encrypted transmissions. "We intercepted Legion burst communications yesterday. Their sleeper units received activation codes 6 hours before the Council session began. They already knew the Council would reinforce the frontier." I murmured. Hayes nodded. "They anticipated the response perfectly." Silence settled over the room. No one looked surprised. Human intelligence analysts had been studying the Legion for months, searching for patterns everyone else ignored. Every prediction had pointed toward infiltration rather than invasion. Now every prediction had been confirmed. "So," Hayes asked, "do we inform the Council?" I considered the question carefully. "If we transmit this now, they'll debate it for days. And by then, the attack will already have started." No one argued. The tactical display shifted again, isolating one narrow mountain corridor on the edge of Solarian territory. Designation: Black Pass, the only natural route connecting 5 major population centers. The only location capable of delaying a mechanized advance long enough to evacuate millions. I studied the terrain in silence. Then I gave the order. Begin Phase 1. Around me, officers quietly turned to their consoles. The Terran Federation was no longer preparing for war. It was preparing to save everyone else from losing it. No public announcement was made. No emergency broadcast warned the Solarian Empire that enemy infiltrators were already inside its borders. Panic would have accomplished nothing except helping the Legion finish what it had spent years preparing. Instead, humanity moved quietly. Reconnaissance drones slipped into the skies above suspected Legion positions, disguised as harmless maintenance satellites. Orbital sensors that officially monitored solar activity were silently redirected toward abandoned industrial zones and forgotten transport hubs. Combat engineers boarded civilian freighters under false cargo manifests, carrying bridge sections, medical supplies, portable shield generators, and enough explosives to reshape entire valleys. Every movement appeared routine. Every movement served a purpose. I stood over the tactical map aboard the Resolute Dawn while reports arrived one after another. Evacuation routes confirmed. Engineering teams in position. Sensor grid complete. Medical convoys ready. No cheering followed. Professional soldiers rarely celebrated preparation. Admiral Hayes enlarged a mountainous region on the holographic display. A narrow corridor cut between sheer cliffs before opening toward 5 densely populated cities. Black Pass, she said quietly. The terrain analysis unfolded across the screen. The surrounding peaks were too steep for armored divisions. Deep ravines prevented large-scale airborne landings. Every alternate route added days to an advancing army. If they seize this corridor, Hayes continued, millions lose their only escape route. They won, I answered. The room became silent. Every officer understood what those 2 words implied. I entered the deployment authorization myself. Engineer battalions received orders to reinforce hidden firing positions carved into the mountainsides. Autonomous defense platforms disappeared beneath rock and snow. Demolition charges were buried deep inside ancient fault lines, each one carefully calibrated rather than hastily placed. Nothing was left to chance. One by one, the readiness indicators turned green. Outside the command deck windows, the stars remained peaceful. Inside Solarian territory, the Iron Legion believed no one had discovered its plan. For a few more hours, that belief would remain intact. It was the greatest advantage humanity possessed. Not superior weapons, not larger fleets, simply the fact that the enemy still believed it was unseen. The first reports reached the Council before dawn. At first, they seemed unrelated. A communications relay on the edge of Solarian space stopped responding. Minutes later, an orbital customs station transmitted a distress signal before disappearing from every sensor network. Then 3 planetary defense grids shut down simultaneously without a single shot being fired. The pattern was unmistakable. The Iron Legion had not crossed the frontier. It had awakened inside it. Hidden facilities that had slept for years suddenly came alive. Underground factories opened their armored doors, releasing columns of mechanized infantry that no intelligence service had ever detected. Saboteurs seized power stations, disabled shield generators, and destroyed long-range communications before local authorities understood they were under attack. Entire cities lost contact within minutes. Panic spread faster than the Legion itself. Aboard the Resolute Dawn, every prediction on our tactical display became reality. Red icons multiplied across Solarian territory exactly where our reconnaissance teams had marked sleeper cells only hours earlier. They'd begun Phase 1, Major Chen reported. Confirmed, Admiral Hayes answered calmly. No frontier engagements? None. The Council's massive battle fleet still waited along the border, facing empty space while the real invasion unfolded hundreds of light years behind them. Millions of civilians suddenly found themselves trapped between advancing Legion armies and mountains that offered only one escape route. Black Pass. I watched evacuation indicators begin moving across the display. Convoys were leaving the threatened cities. Hospital transports, refugee columns, emergency rail networks. Everything flowed toward the narrow corridor we had prepared in silence. A priority transmission arrived from Aurora Nexus. The Council demanded immediate explanations. Their frontier sensors showed no enemy fleets. According to every official report, the invasion should have been impossible. I closed the message without replying. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, lives mattered more than pride. I turned toward Admiral Hayes. Begin civilian extraction. She nodded once. And Black Pass? I looked at the mountain corridor glowing on the tactical display. I'll handle Black Pass myself. No one argued. Every officer in the command center understood exactly what those words meant. Within minutes, my transport shuttle was already preparing for departure. My shuttle touched down just before sunset. Black Pass was exactly as the reconnaissance images had shown it, a narrow corridor carved through towering mountains, its steep cliffs leaving no room for armored formations to spread out. Every civilian convoy escaping the surrounding cities would be forced through this single route. Lose the pass, and millions would be trapped. Colonel Harris met me at the landing zone. The last evacuation column entered the corridor 20 minutes ago, he reported. Engineering teams have finished placing the demolition charges. Automated turrets are concealed. Minefields are armed. How much time? He glanced at his tactical display. Enemy vanguard. Less than an hour. I nodded. Withdraw your battalion. He hesitated. Sir, take every soldier, every engineer, every medic, and escort the civilians. That's your mission now. And yours? I looked toward the distant mountains where faint flashes already marked the Legion. This advance. I'll slow them down. Silence settled between us. You can hold this pass alone. I done. You need to hold it forever. Only long enough. Harris opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He had served beside enough Terrans to recognize a decision that had already been made. He saluted. Good luck. I won. Need luck. The battalion departed within minutes, their transports disappearing into the fading light as the final refugee convoys continued toward safety. Soon the mountains became quiet. Only the wind remained. I walked the length of Black Pass one final time, checking every firing position myself. Motion sensors disappeared beneath loose stone. Autonomous gun platforms blended perfectly into the cliffs. Remote detonators connected dozens of carefully buried charges that reached deep into the mountain itself. Nothing had been placed carelessly. Every meter of ground had a purpose. A warning tone sounded in my earpiece. Long-range sensors had detected movement. Thousands of signatures. The Iron Legion had arrived. I took my position behind the first defensive line, chambered around, and watched the darkness beyond the pass. For the first time since the invasion began, I smiled. The Legion believed it had found a single human standing alone. It had no idea the mountain itself had become my weapon. The First Legion scouts entered the pass exactly as I had predicted. They advanced with mechanical precision, armored infantry supported by assault walkers and autonomous drones sweeping every ledge for hidden defenders. Their commanders expected an ambush from an entire battalion. Instead, they found one man. I waited until the lead column crossed the first marker. Then I pressed the detonator. The mountains answered. Hundreds of buried charges erupted beneath the valley floor, hurling stone, steel, and shattered earth into the advancing formation. Before the smoke settled, automated turrets concealed within the cliffs opened fire, cutting through drones while electronic warfare systems flooded Legion communications with false commands and sensor ghosts. Their formation dissolved instantly, exactly as planned. Every time they regrouped, another minefield forced them into a different route. Every time they sought cover, carefully weakened cliffs collapsed around them. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see on a battlefield that seemed determined to kill them. Hours passed. The evacuation convoys continued moving beyond the mountains. Millions of civilians were getting farther away. That was all that mattered. Far behind the front lines, aboard the Imperial flagship, Olivia watched the battle unfold through reconnaissance feeds. She couldn't understand how a single human was delaying an entire invasion force. Then an intelligence officer approached carrying a sealed Terran archive. We recovered this from Federation military records, he said quietly. It was classified beyond council clearance. Olivia broke the encryption. The first page stole her breath. Commander Ethan Brooks, Ghost Division Supreme Strategic Command. Her hands trembled as she continued reading. Operation after operation filled the display. Impossible victories. Enemy fleets destroyed through deception rather than numbers. Entire wars ended by a commander who always appeared where no one expected him. The final report was dated 12 years earlier. Conflict concluded. Commander Brooks voluntarily retired. Status classified. Olivia stared at the name. My name, the quiet civilian she had married. The man she believed had simply walked away from military service. In reality, I had once commanded the most feared special operations force in human history. And now I was standing alone at Black Pass, doing exactly what the Ghost Division had always done. Buying time with preparation instead of promises. The Legion refused to retreat. Wave after wave crashed against Black Pass, each assault larger than the last. My ammunition dwindled, automated turrets fell silent one by one, and the minefields that had shattered the first advance became empty scars across the valley floor. Still, Every minute they spent fighting me was another minute the evacuation convoys gained. A warning flashed across my visor. Civilian evacuation, 98% complete. Good. That meant I could finish this. Far above the battlefield, Allied fleets finally emerged from hyperspace. The Council had at last realized the true direction of the invasion and rushed every available warship towards Solarian territory. They were still hours too late to stop the attack, but not too late to end it. I opened the final encrypted channel. Resolute Dawn, this is Brooks. Admiral Hayes answered immediately. We in position. Then execute Protocol Ash. There was a brief silence. Confirmed. I looked across the mountains one last time. The Legion had forced its way deep into the pass, exactly where I had intended them to be. Thousands of armored vehicles crowded the narrow corridor, with countless more pressing from behind. There was no room to maneuver, no room to escape. I pressed the last detonator. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the mountains moved. A deafening roar swallowed every other sound as hundreds of precisely positioned charges ignited beneath ancient fault lines. Entire cliffs collapsed together, releasing millions of tons of rock that crashed into the valley like an avalanche unleashed by the planet itself. The earth shook violently. The sky disappeared behind dust and shattered stone. Within seconds, Black Pass no longer existed. Where a corridor had once connected the Empire, only an impassable wall of broken mountains remained. The Iron Legion, its invasion force, vanished beneath the collapse, trapped forever beneath the weight of the range it had tried to conquer. Above the dust clouds, the Allied fleets opened fire. With the ground army destroyed and its supply lines severed, the remaining Legion ships were overwhelmed. For the first time since the war began, the enemy had nowhere left to advance. The battle for the Solarian Empire was over. The victory at Black Pass spread across the galaxy faster than any official report. By the time rescue teams reached the collapsed mountains, the story had already become legend. One ordinary-looking human had delayed an invasion long enough for millions of strangers to escape. Every surviving Legion prisoner told the same story. They had expected fear, desperation, and surrender. Instead, they found discipline, preparation, and a man who never wasted a single movement. When I returned to Aurora Nexus, the council chamber was silent. The same delegates who had laughed at my warnings now stood as I entered. No speeches were prepared. No one attempted to justify their earlier decisions. They had seen the recordings from Black Pass and the classified files the Terran Federation had finally agreed to release. They now understood that humanity's greatest strength had never been superior technology or larger fleets. It was the willingness to prepare long before danger appeared. The speaker offered humanity permanent command of the new Galactic Defense Forces. Several empires pledged military alliances under Terran leadership. Others proposed exclusive defense treaties, believing humanity had earned the right to lead the galaxy. Our ambassador declined every offer. The Terran Federation did not fight to rule anyone, she said calmly. Power concentrated in one civilization creates the next disaster. We propose something stronger than domination. The chamber listened. A permanent galactic defense alliance. Every member world would share intelligence instead of hiding it. Engineering breakthroughs would be exchanged freely. Military academies would train together rather than compete. Early warning networks would protect every civilization equally, ensuring no enemy could ever again grow unseen within their borders. This time, no one laughed. The proposal passed unanimously. The war had changed more than political borders. It had changed how the galaxy understood strength. Not as the size of a fleet, not as the power of a weapon, but as the quiet determination to stand alone when everyone else was still arguing, and to do so without asking for recognition when the battle was over. A year later, Black Pass became more than a battlefield. The Solarian Empire preserved the shattered valley as a protected memorial, leaving every scar exactly where the mountains had fallen. At Olivia's request, the Brooks Academy of Strategic Defense was founded nearby, where officers from every major civilization studied one principle above all others: protect lives first. Victory comes second. I never accepted a statue or title. Those belonged to the people who never returned, not to those fortunate enough to survive. At the next session of the Galactic Council, an elderly historian rose to close the annual record. His words echoed through the chamber that had once laughed at a human civilian. She judged her husband by appearances and believed strength belonged to those with the largest armies. Then she watched one man stand alone against an empire so millions of strangers could live. That day, the galaxy discovered humanity's greatest weapon was never its fleets or its machines. It was the quiet resolve to sacrifice everything for people they would never know. No one applauded. No one spoke. The silence itself became the final entry in the council's record. And somehow, it said everything.